Good evening. I would like to thank everybody for joining us this evening or tuning in. We're having our candidate forum for our local legislative races this evening, and I'd like to let everybody know we have invited all candidates to participate. We have not received 100% participation at this point in time, but we do want to let everybody know in the audience that we have asked everyone to join us this evening. Tonight, we're going to see several of our candidates in front of us. And the process is going to get a little redundant for the viewing audience. I apologize for that up front, but our process is going to be having each candidate come in, introduce who they are, the office they're running for, and then respond to a couple questions that we have prepared as a city council for each candidate. They're going to get the same questions. That way the audience can compare and contrast each candidate on the two topics that we've provided them and their importance to city government. After they've responded to the questions, we plan on having them give a 2-minute closing, at which point in time we will ask them to step down and we will introduce the next candidate who is waiting outside the room. There's not any one candidate who will hear any of the responses from any prior candidate. So with that, what I'd like to do, I would like to start, and we have with us Olszewski. Ronald, can you please introduce yourself and tell us about House District 7?
Awesome. Hello, good evening. I am Olszewski, and I am the Republican candidate running for Kalispell's House District 7. I've been volunteering my time in Helena for many of the past legislative sessions, working with leaders to strengthen community and our opportunities for our families. As a legislative spouse and as a volunteer, I learned how important it is for the citizen legislature to have active citizens. And I am just like you, those who are viewing at home. I am an active community member. I'm a mom. I work in our community. And I understand, just like you, that working hard should be rewarded, not taxed more. We know that the way to grow our economy is to get the government out of our business and out of our wallet. And we believe that solutions are possible.
Thank you, Ronald. First question we have for you this evening is related to local option sales tax. As a municipality, we're faced with many funding challenges and increasing demands for services. One of our biggest struggles is paying for maintenance and expansion of public infrastructure, especially when we look at our transportation infrastructure. As the county seat and the business center for Flathead County, our residents are saddled with the responsibility to pay for the maintenance and repairs of our roadways, yet all of the county's residents and our visitors benefit from this infrastructure. Would you support in the Montana legislature a bill to allow local municipalities to implement a local option sales tax, much like the resort tax that Whitefish enjoys, to give our municipalities the option of helping fund infrastructure projects?
As I can fully understand the need to continue to look at revenue tools to improve infrastructure development in Kalispell, a sales tax paid by tourists seems to be the most expedient method to get the job done. But I would implore our city leaders to look at ways to reduce costs, to restructure expenditures where possible, and then to hold the line to continue to look out for what's best for the people that we serve, the people who live here. A tourist, yes, will surely pay as they come here to play, but what about those who sacrifice financially much to live here? What assurances are we going to provide that will protect their investment in our community? So my position on it would be that that needs to be looked at and considered.
Okay, thank you. Our second question is related to tax increment financing. Kalispell has had the opportunity to utilize tax increment financing to assist with the redevelopment of blighted areas. Over time, the tax increment financing laws in Montana have become more restrictive and have limited some of the flexibility that these laws have allowed in the past. Do you support tax increment financing, and do you think that the laws are too flexible as they are written now, too limiting, or just about right, and why do you believe this?
Well, I think that the TIF funding is a great opportunity for our community. I do not want to see any changes that will create an environment where we're unable to continue with the strategic plan that we have in place. So if we have a strategic plan already in our communities, I don't want to see the state going in and making it difficult for those plans to be fulfilled.
Okay, great, thank you. Now, for the last part this evening, we'd like to give you a couple minutes to explain why you're the best candidate for House District 7, and give us your closing, and I'm assuming ask for the vote.
Well, thank you so much for your time and your attention to be involved and to be active and to be informed in your vote, and I thank you. I thank you also for the opportunity to meet so many of you at the door and the opportunity to talk about the real issues. So we need solutions. We need solutions for the water compact, one that doesn't take away our water right or our water use. We need access to Montana lands. And as the only candidate in this race with the endorsement of the NRA, the Montana Shooting Sports Association, and the Montana Conservatives, I believe that I am an advocate for you. I'm committed to serve in Helena. I've been there volunteering, and now I want to go back and continue to work with the allies that I've made in leadership to continue to protect and grow our communities. So tonight, I thank you. I thank you for being involved, and I ask humbly for your vote and your support.
Thank you, Ms. Skies. At this point in time, we're going to move forward with the next candidate for House District 7. And what I would like to do is invite Mr. Frank Garner to step forward and join me at the bench. So once again, I would like to thank all of the candidates for appearing this evening. This is a valuable and important tool, I think, for the electorate of Kalispell to understand where the candidates are on some of the important topics that we as a council have addressed many times and will continue to address in the future. So we look forward to hearing more of the responses. And at this point in time, I would like to welcome Mr. Frank Garner, who wasn't quite standing right outside. But anyway, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Garner, you've been advised of the rules. What we're going to do is a 1-minute intro, a couple questions where we get 2-minute responses, and then a 2-minute closing where you can ask for the vote.
Okay.
So, at this point in time, I'd like to introduce yourself.
Okay. My name is Frank Garner, and I'm running for House District 7 in Kalispell. And this all seems pretty familiar to me. I've been here a time or two. I've been about 250 meetings, I think, into the chamber, although it was across the street at the time. My personal background is I grew up in Kalispell, graduated from Flathead High School. I raised my family here. I've got 3 kids, all who graduated from Flathead High School too. My wife and I have been married 34 years, and my professional history includes working 21 years for the Kalispell Police Department. I've worked 7 years for Kalispell Regional Health Care, and I spent a year in Afghanistan. I've worked for a number of the local community organizations, Rotary, Lions, Big Brothers and Sisters, CARE, and help work in those organizations and in some cases lead them. And I'm running because I think it's time that we did things a little differently, because I think there's some things and a direction that we need to change.
Thank you, Frank. You ready for the first question?
Go ahead.
Okay, Frank, our first question this evening is related to local option sales tax. As a municipality, we're faced with many funding challenges and increasing demands for services. One of our biggest struggles is paying for maintenance and expansion of public infrastructure, especially when we look at our transportation infrastructure. As the county seat and the business center for Flathead County, our residents are saddled with the responsibility to pay for the maintenance and repairs of our roadways, yet all of the county's residents and our visitors benefit from this infrastructure. Would you support in the Montana legislature a bill to allow local municipalities to implement a local option sales tax, much like the resort tax that Whitefish enjoys, to give municipalities the option of helping fund infrastructure projects?
First, I think you have to look at Kalispell and how it is unique really in not just our area, but in Montana. I think Kalispell is unique in that if you look at the other large cities in Montana, like Great Falls, Missoula, Helena, Billings, the majority of the population in those counties are actually inside the city. That's not true here. The majority of the population in this county is outside the city, and so as the county seat, Kalispell helps provide services to a number of people that aren't inside the city limits and who aren't property taxpayers. And so I think to me, it's a matter of who's in charge of the destiny of the people in Kalispell, right? Because if you do it at a state level, then the majority of those people who are going to be voting on that tax are going to be outside Flathead County. Where with a local option tax, the people inside the city of Kalispell can determine their own future. And I think that's what it's about. I think it's about local control. And so I would support either a change to the existing law that allows for that arbitrary population number to go away, that would allow for people to decide whether they want to tax themselves more or not. I think there are a couple of things that are important to look at. One is, I'm a personal proponent, if you do that, that there's some sort of property tax relief for those people that are involved. But I think it's really between the people of Kalispell, and it should be their decision about whether they're going to exercise that, not the representative from eastern Montana to decide whether they are or not.
Thank you. Our second question is related to tax increment financing. Kalispell has had the opportunity to utilize tax increment financing to assist with the redevelopment of blighted areas. Over time, the tax increment financing laws in Montana have become more restrictive and have limited some of the flexibility that those laws allowed. Do you support tax increment financing, and do you think the laws are too flexible as they are written now, too limiting, or just about right?
I do support tax increment financing, but I think it should be limited, and I think the state has a role in making sure that there is some limit on it, and here's why. When properties are taken off of the tax rolls, essentially, when they go into tax increment financing districts, I think one of the things that you have to remember is that school districts and counties also don't receive the money from those districts. Now, having said that, to me, it's, and the businessman part of me says this is all about return on investment, that cities have to have that flexibility, that ability to be able to take blighted areas and improve them, put in new infrastructure. I think the railroad tracks here in town is a perfect example in that west side district. I don't see where private investment is going to come into play that's going to help remove that and help put the city in a position to help develop that area through town. So I think tax increment financing is the perfect vehicle for that. But I think it has to be done responsibly, and there has to be a return on the investment. I think for the schools in the county, what they need to see is that there's going to be a time where those are going to come back in and at a higher level, right? And cities have to see that they have the opportunity to help provide infrastructure so private businesses can then invest in those areas, private individuals can invest in those areas. As I mentioned, I spent a year in Afghanistan. It was really interesting to watch where they put the infrastructure, new roads, water, that kind of thing. That's where you saw commerce. That's where you saw people move to, those areas where infrastructure was in. And I think it's important for cities to have that ability, and the city of Kalispell needs that through tax increment financing.
Okay, thank you. Frank, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us this evening and respond to our questions. In your last 2 minutes, would you please tell us why you believe you're the best person to receive our vote on June 3rd?
Okay. Well, the reason I think is, to begin with, I'm pretty familiar with Kalispell, not only from living here, raising my family here, but working and being involved in this community for really 3 generations. I think this is an extension of my public service. I've been involved in many things in this community, and I'd like to have the opportunity, by serving in the state legislature, to try to do a few things differently. I'd like to mention what a couple of those are. I think one of those things is that when I look at our $400 million surplus at the state level, I think it's important for us to try to make sure people understand that we're thinking about them too. And one of the things I've proposed is a cut to the payroll tax to try to make sure some of that money in that surplus stays at home here and is spent on the streets of Kalispell rather than sitting in banks in Helena. And I think if we can't do a tax cut when we have a $400 million surplus, I'm not really sure when we're going to do it, right? So I think to begin with, it's time for us to do things a little differently, and that's one of them. I'm a big proponent of education. I'm fortunate I've got, a laboratory scientist, a engineer, and a Marine. And I'm really proud of my kids, and they're products of the local school system, and so am I. And what I know is that it's essential that we invest in education for our kids, and that as a community, we help them identify, because one of the outcomes has to be that they get a job. We help them identify what those skills are that employers are looking for. If we do a good job of doing that, if we do a good job of educating our workforce, businesses will come here and do what private businesses do best, and that's create jobs. I think that's one of the things that's really important for us to do. And I think it's about certainty. I think people want certainty in government. They want to know that we're going to go to Helena, we're going to do the people's work, that we're going to listen to them, and that we're going to work together for the best outcome for the people of the districts we represent. And I think I know Kalispell, and I'd like to have that opportunity to represent Kalispell and to make sure that I'm their advocate.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Garner.
Okay, thank you,
Appreciate
Mayor.
you joining
I
us this
appreciate the
evening.
time.
Okay. At this point in time, we'd like to have our first candidate for House District 11 join us, Mr. Michael Hebert.
Yes, sir.
Mike,
Hey,
welcome.
Thank you. Sit down.
Please, sit down, Mike. Mike, you've been informed about the process, what we're going to do this evening. You're going to have 1 minute for an opening, a couple minutes to respond to each question that we ask,
Okay.
and then a 2-minute closing where you ask for the vote.
All right.
At this point in time, I'd like you to introduce yourself and why you're running.
Hi, I'm Michael Hebert, or you can say Mike Hebert. It's spelled H-E-B-E-R-T. And I'm running to be representative of House District 11. I'm the more conservative choice for legislative candidates, and I definitely have a long history of service and volunteer work in the community. I feel that we have a great state. We have a lot of opportunity here, and I want to be one of the decision makers there in Helena to bring more opportunity and more success to the Flathead Valley. And that's my goal.
Thank you. First question for you this evening is related to local option sales tax. As a municipality, we're faced with many funding challenges and increasing demands for services. One of our biggest struggles is paying for maintenance and expansion of public infrastructure, especially when we look at our transportation infrastructure. As the county seat and the business center for Flathead County, our residents are saddled with the responsibility to pay for the maintenance and repairs for our roadways. Yet all of the county's residents and our visitors benefit from this infrastructure. Would you support in the Montana legislature a bill to allow local municipalities to implement a local option sales tax, much like the resort tax that Whitefish enjoys, to give municipalities the option of helping fund infrastructure projects?
Well, I understand the premise of this question. I know cities are always looking for more money, more funding, and these local option taxes seem like a very alluring option. But as a representative of the people, and knowing my constituents, they don't want any more taxes. They don't want a sales tax. Most people, when they've moved here to Montana or have lived here in Montana their whole lives, they're very proud that we don't have sales taxes like other states. And so I find a resistance amongst the constituents and myself to support another tax, especially a sales tax.
Okay. Our second question is related to tax increment financing. Kalispell has had the opportunity to utilize tax increment financing to assist with the redevelopment of blighted areas. Over time, the tax increment financing laws in Montana have become more restrictive and have limited some of the flexibility that these laws have allowed. Do you support tax increment financing, and do you think that the laws are too flexible as they are written now, too limiting, or just about right?
Well, first, I understand, again, about this tax, and to me, it seems like a tax that picks losers and winners. It chooses who they want to pour the tax money into, businesses and streets and such areas. And so, again, I don't support more tax. We definitely have a unique situation in the state of Montana in the fact that we have the highest business taxes of all the states in the union. And so what I hear from business leaders and community leaders is they don't want any more taxes. And so pushing forth another tax, whether it's 3% or 4%, is just not an option for me as a representative of the people. And what I want to know is, what would you do with the taxes as the city? What's your plan with that certain tax?
Essentially, it's basically we use it for the redevelopment of blighted areas. We take advantage of the increase in tax revenue based on the increase in property value that happens with that redevelopment.
Right, and so I've read up on this, and there's been a lot of studies on this because it's like it is so attractive for cities to say, wow, we can really improve our business sector and bring more business here. And the problem is that there hasn't been a conclusive study that says that works. And so that, I understand where we want to go with this, and again, no new taxes, right?
Okay.
That's what I stand on.
Thank you. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us this evening and responding to our questions. In your last 2 minutes, would you please tell us why you believe you are the best person to receive our vote on June 3rd?
Okay. Well, I serve and I volunteer because I care about Montana. We're the best state in the union, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinion. Remember the bumper stickers, the last best place? Well, I want to preserve that. I want to protect that. I want to make sure that the opportunities are there for my children and your children. I want to protect and keep a vibrant economy. I know that we can undo a lot of unnecessary regulations and taxes that have been burdening businesses and startup of businesses. I am supported by a lot of Republican legislators. I know that I want to follow in the footsteps of great men like Mark Blasdel and a great woman like Janet Taylor and Verdell Jackson, who supports me in my run. I'm supported by more conservative legislators than my opponent, because I understand, because I've worked long and hard in the Republican Party, helping promote our ideas and our ideology of less taxes, more freedom, more liberty. I feel it's really important that as we look at these things coming into the future, what's going to be best for Montana, what's going to be best for our citizens of this community, Flathead here, District 11. I know that the citizens are frustrated with the property taxes. It seems that we're more dependent on property taxes to fund our schools when we have the ability to develop our natural resources. And with the technology that we have now, we can develop our natural resources, our oil and our gas and our coal and other minerals clean and efficiently and provide an amazing amount of revenue for our state and higher paying wages and jobs for our people. And what I want to do is I want to see this happen, and I want to get into Helena to make sure that we have this opportunity. I know that other people, like my opponent, have supported big government, more tax programs, and I've made a commitment that I'm not going to support big government, more taxes, that I'm going to support my people, the constituents of my District 11, and being the candidate that represents them the most as a conservative Republican.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hebert.
Appreciate it.
Okay. At this point in time, I'd like to welcome Dr. Albert Olszewski to the stand, where he can respond to our questions. So, Dr. Olszewski, thank you for joining us. Good, very good. The rules have been explained to you.
Yes.
1 minute intro, and then 2 minutes to respond to each question that we ask, and then a 2-minute closing, where you get to ask for the vote. So, are you ready to begin?
I am.
Okay, well, go ahead and start with your opening.
Well, Mark, as you know, I was born and raised in Great Falls, Montana, and after serving in the Air Force, I joined the Flathead community approximately 16 years ago when I joined Flathead Orthopedics. As an orthopedic surgeon, I've taken care of you, your parents, the people around here, the brothers and sisters and their children in the emergency room, in the operating room, and on the athletic field. And what I'd like to do is continue to serve the community, but now as a House representative for House District 11.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, we have 2 topics for questions. The first question this evening is related to local option sales tax. As a municipality, we're faced with many funding challenges and increasing demands for services. One of our biggest struggles is paying for maintenance and expansion of public infrastructure, especially when we look at our transportation infrastructure. As the county seat and the business center for Flathead County, our residents are saddled with the responsibility to pay for the maintenance and repairs of our roadways. Yet all of the county's residents and our visitors benefit from this infrastructure. Would you support in the Montana legislature a bill to allow local municipalities to implement a local option sales tax, much like the resort tax Whitefish enjoys, to give municipalities the option of helping fund infrastructure projects?
Well, Mark, on that situation, personally, I'm not a big fan of sales tax, but like you, I've watched what's happened in Flathead County and what's happened in this valley. And there's been such a great demand on our city for resources, and it's been left to to the citizens of Kalispell to try to support the roads and all the structures required for everybody that comes through this valley. And so, yeah, I'm open to the idea of local governments looking at new ideas to try in a way to fund for these requirements for infrastructure. So in this situation, I would not fight against it. I would not be the big advocate, but I would be listening to your I guess, your story and what you would think is important for here. And I think it's important for local governments to have control and say over how they run their business.
Thank you. Our second question is related to tax increment financing. Kalispell has had the opportunity to utilize tax increment financing to assist with the redevelopment of blighted areas. Over time, the tax increment financing laws in Montana have become more restrictive and have limited some of the flexibility that these laws allow. Do you support tax increment financing, and do you think that the laws are too flexible as they're written now, too limiting, or just about right?
As a physician, I'm not an expert on, incremental financing that we see. How, tax incremental financing came into my forefront was really the issue of eminent domain that occurred back in 2005. This is where Kelo versus the City of New London pretty much lost the ability to maintain their own property and had to forfeit their property through eminent domain to another private entity. That really bothered me, that the Supreme Court used the Fifth Amendment and the taking clause to support that. So I'm really hesitant to try to support incremental financing. I'd rather support other alternatives, whether it's going through tax-free bonds and such. Once again, I would have to listen to, to the plan and what the proposal would be before I would support it or would oppose it.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to thank you for taking the time joining us this evening and responding to our questions. In the last 2 minutes, please tell us why you believe you're the best person to receive our vote on June 3rd.
Well, Mark, once again, thank you for this opportunity. Even tonight, as you can see, I'm a physician. I'm not a tax accountant. I'm not an economics major. But I'm somebody who's willing to look at the problem, look at what people propose as solutions, research them, and then come up with a decision. I think it's really important to be open and be ready to institute new ideas because the old ones are slowly failing to work. So I bring that to the table. I bring the same logical way of looking at things that I do as a physician, look at things as if they have symptoms and signs and try to work with what we got to come up with the best possible answer. We can't have perfect answers all the time. We have to settle with what's best for the situation. So I appreciate your vote, if you're in my area, and for those that are out there from House District 11, thank you for the opportunity.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Olszewski. Okay, at this point in time, we're going to move on to Senate District 4, and we have the former mayor of Kalispell, Tammi Fisher, joining us first. Ms. Fisher, welcome.
Mayor, thank you.
So, Ms. Fisher, you've been apprised of the rules this evening. We're going to have 1 minute for an opening, and then 2 minutes to respond to the 2 questions that we have, and then a 2-minute closing where you tell us why we need to vote for you. So please, go ahead and start with your introduction.
Okay, well, I think most people know me as the former mayor of Kalispell. I used to sit in your chair. In 2009, I was elected. It was my first political position, and the city of Kalispell essentially gave me a mandate when they elected me because they took a chance on me to get the fiscal house back in order, to repair some broken relationships, and to remove some regulations that were really keeping Kalispell from thriving. And we were able to accomplish all of that, and I'm very proud of our record here in the city of Kalispell. what I found in my second year was that we were restricted from being able to move the ball even further for Kalispell, that Kalispell was restricted from determining its own fate. And that was critically important to me and to the rest of council. There were restrictions on a state level that were unnecessary and didn't need to be there. And it really prevented Kalispell from its growth and moving forward. And so that's why I decided to run for the Senate and hopefully represent Kalispell in Helena.
Good. Right on time. Okay, our first question for you this evening is related to local option sales tax. As a municipality, as you well know, we're faced with many funding challenges and increasing demands on services. One of our biggest struggles is paying for maintenance and expansion of public infrastructure, especially when we look at our transportation infrastructure. As the county seat and the business center for Flathead County, our residents are saddled with the responsibility to pay for the maintenance and repairs of our roadways, yet all of the county's residents and their visitors benefit from this infrastructure. Would you support in the Montana legislature a bill to allow local municipalities to implement a local option sales tax, much like the resort tax that Whitefish enjoys, to give municipalities the option of helping fund infrastructure projects?
So this is one of those areas where I think the state has really been very arbitrary in its approach to places like Kalispell. Kalispell generates the same kind of economic behavior as, say, Whitefish does. We see the same tourists, and we're a tourist-based economy. And so the state has taken a position that treats us differently than it does the rest of the state, or it treats us the same across the board as we are in the entire state. So just by this arbitrary basis of Kalispell has 22,000 people, Whitefish has 6,000, they get the option of a local option sales tax. I don't necessarily think that a sales tax is appropriate for the city of Kalispell because there would have to be some significant restrictions, like a firm and complete reduction in property taxes. But what I also don't believe is fair is that the state doesn't even give us the option of choosing our own fate. And this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about local control and state regulations restricting us where they don't belong. It's none of their business. How we pay for our roads and maintenance is our business. And if we determine that through the city of Kalispell, if the people want to vote for a sales tax, they should be given that option, because setting arbitrary standards based upon population size is just wrong. It's capricious, it's unfair, and it's an example of how state government has overly restricted Kalispell from determining its own fate. And so I would support the ability of Kalispell to vote on that. But for me personally, to make that vote, there would have to be some significant restrictions so that we can ensure that people like my parents who are on a fixed income see a requisite reduction in their property taxes.
Okay, thank you. Our second question is related to tax increment financing. Kalispell has had the opportunity to utilize tax increment financing to assist with the redevelopment of blighted areas. Over time, the tax increment financing laws in Montana have become more restrictive and have limited some of the flexibility that these laws have allowed in the past. Do you support tax increment financing, and do you think the laws are too flexible as they are written now, too limiting, or just about right?
I support tax increment financing because it's one of the only ways that we can really generate some economic development in failing areas of the city or blighted areas of the city. What I don't support, again, this is a local control, is states putting restrictions on what the city of Kalispell can do. This council is fully capable of making good decisions for the city of Kalispell. And if they don't make good decisions, then the voters can go to the voting booth and change that. The state doesn't need to tell the city of Kalispell and the city council what they can and cannot do with tax increment financing. The decisions that we made here in the city of Kalispell to implement the Urban Renewal Agency, where we have a full vetting process for TIF districts and TIF projects, is appropriate in order to bring forward those projects to the city council level. But it should be the city council that determines ultimately how those tax dollars are spent. It shouldn't be the state of Montana, because the state of Montana benefits in no way from TIF districts, nor is there any detriment to the state of Montana financially. That all rests locally with local control.
Okay, thank you. Tammi, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us this evening. In your last 2 minutes, please tell us why we need to vote for you.
I think that what is interesting about the city of Kalispell is we're at this critical point. We can decide our own fate. And the way we decide that is we need to decide if local control really matters. If you believe in states' rights, if you believe that the federal government shouldn't tell the state of Montana how it should function, then two, you should believe that the state of Montana shouldn't tell the city of Kalispell how to function. And if you believe in local control, you also believe in local representation. You believe that the people who represent you should have a vested interest in their community. And it makes a difference, because when you're invested in the community, you perceive things differently. When you go to make difficult decisions, you have to look the people, your neighbors, in the eye when you make those decisions. And when you're making difficult decisions about Medicaid, about pensions, about teacher salaries, about public safety benefits, you need to be able to look at the people who are your neighbors and say, this was the best decision for my community. And the way that you do that is to be fully invested in your community. And it might surprise some people to know you do not have to live in the district that you're running for office in. I am the only candidate that lives in the district she's seeking to represent, pays taxes in that district, educates my kids in that district, and is otherwise invested in the community. I also work in the district. So I know who sends me to Helena. I remember that because they're my neighbors and my friends, and I am beholden to them. So if you believe in local control and local representation, you believe that the person who represents Kalispell should have a fundamental knowledge of the issues facing Kalispell. Because if you don't, you're talking about the water compact when what you should be talking about are TMDLs. And TMDLs actually have a net effect on a person's pocketbook in the city of Kalispell. If you don't know about city of Kalispell's issues, you cannot cogently discuss those things, understand when unreasonable restrictions are occurring, and otherwise come back to the city of Kalispell and make effective changes.
Ms. Fisher, thank you for joining us this evening.
Thanks very much.
And our last candidate, also from Senate District 4, is Mark Blasdel. Mark was the former president of the House of Representatives and is now running for Senate District 4. Mark, welcome. Dude. Mark, you were made aware of the rules of what we're doing this evening, so 1 minute for an opening, 2 minutes to respond to each of our questions, and then a 2-minute closing, why we need to vote for you on June 3rd. So at this time, please introduce yourself and why you're running.
Well, good evening, and first and foremost, thank you to the Kalispell City Council and you, Mayor Johnson, for allowing us to have this opportunity today. I think this is one of the first times that we've had this. My name is Mark Blasdel. I'm a third-generation Flathead Valley resident that grew up here in the valley on the family farm just south of Kalispell. My family's ran the Vista Restaurant and Catering for the last 33 years, and we've served all parts of Flathead Valley, including Kalispell, in a lot of different capacities. I went to school here at St. Matthew's down here on Main Street, and then I graduated from Flathead High in 1994. Attended 1 year at FECC, and then went off to college in Las Vegas before moving back here and purchasing my first home up on West Arizona here in Kalispell. Since that time, I've served in the legislature for the last 8 years, including being the 52nd Speaker of the House in a term and a capacity that I serve in at this point in time. So I look forward to the questions and any questions you have of me.
Great. Mark, our first question this evening is related to local option sales tax. As a municipality, we're faced with many funding challenges and increasing demands for services. One of our biggest struggles is paying for maintenance and expansion of public infrastructure, especially when we look at our transportation infrastructure. As the county seat and the business center for Flathead County, our residents are saddled with the responsibility to pay for the maintenance and repairs of our roadways. Yet all of the county's residents and our visitors benefit from this infrastructure. Would you support the Montana legislature, a bill to allow local municipalities to implement a local option sales tax, much like the resort tax that Whitefish enjoys, to give municipalities the option of helping fund infrastructure projects?
Well, first and foremost, this bill was brought forward 2 sessions ago by then Senate Chairman of Taxation, Jeff Essman, out of Billings, and it garnered 13 votes. So this is a huge uphill climb not only in the Senate, but more in the House. At this time, no, I would not support it. Not because I don't see the concerns and the issues that you're facing here in the city of Kalispell, but I think there's better ways to do this. At this point in time, Montana has the 4th most selective sales taxes of any state in the nation. In 2001, what was called the Big Bill was passed, which was a 388-page document where the state actually pulled a bunch of the local municipalities and county money into the state and then started reimbursing it as they saw fit. And I think that's where a lot of the issues are coming. I think we can do a lot more to look at how those reimbursements are coming, what we can do more with the money that the state has, because obviously we do have some surpluses there, and how you can keep more at the local level that way. I also think that we need to continue to focus on how we can do more with our public lands and our natural resources to improve infrastructure and public safety and those issues instead of going back to the taxpayers. No matter what, it is a sales tax, and even if the city council got the chance to run it and they promised tax relief, that's only till the next city council election. The next city council election could change, have huge turnover or change, and they could change that if they wanted to. So I think there's some ways that we can do it better that I'd like to address, I think, through long-range planning and so forth, without adding another tax.
Our second question is related to tax increment financing. Kalispell has had the opportunity to utilize tax increment financing to assist with the redevelopment of blighted areas. Over time, the tax increment financing laws in Montana have become more restrictive and have limited some of the flexibility that these laws have allowed in the past. Do you support tax increment financing, and do you think the laws are too flexible as they are written now, too limited, or about right?
Well, I think for the city of Kalispell's done a pretty good job of it. Where I've seen the issues is more in the city of Billings. They've done a lot of things where they've blighted areas that were not considered blighted by the citizens. That's where us as the legislature have heard most of the complaints, and I think that's where you've seen a lot of the bills coming from is legislators out of Billings as far as that goes. And so I think one of the things City of Kalispell needs to do is work with these other cities and kind of police each other to make sure that you're doing it right, to try to, because all it takes is one person to come forward and start bringing issues forward on that. Because if it does become an issue where other taxpayers are feeling the burden because the TIF districts are mismanaged, I think that's when the state starts to hear about it. But otherwise, I think we need to leave them alone, let you make the decisions that are best suited for you, and be happy to hear from you when issues and concerns come forward.
Okay, great. Thank you. Mark, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join us this evening and respond to our questions. In the last 2 minutes, would you please tell us why you believe you're the best person to receive our vote on June 3rd?
Well, thank you once again for the time and the opportunity to do this. It's been great campaigning in Senate District 4 and speaking with a lot of the citizens. A lot's been made about the issue that I don't live inside the district lines, and that's kind of a factor of the redistricting that just happened, that happens each 10 years. And if you looked across the map in Flathead, there's a number of legislators that no longer live within the boundaries of their districts, and that was of no working of ours. That's the 5-member redistricting panel. But what I feel is that I've served for the last 8 years and tried to represent Kalispell and the entire Flathead Valley, because I believe that's what's important. We have 9 House members and 4 senators, and if we don't work together and we don't use the relationships that we have to act as one, the whole Flathead Valley and the city of Kalispell loses. I believe there's much bigger issues than where I live facing the Flathead Valley and Kalispell, including the water compact, including our tax structure and how we can do more to incentivize business and investors and entrepreneurs. I believe we need to continue to focus on how we can protect the liberties and freedoms that each of us believe that we have and are at stake every single election cycle and every session. So with that, I think I can go down there on day one with the leadership and experience that I have and be able to enter in and be a part of the solution, not the problem. And I'd appreciate the vote of the citizens of Senate District 4. If anybody has any questions of me, they're more than welcome to call me. My number is 261-3269, or you can go on my website at markblasdel.us and contact me that way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for coming and joining us this evening. I'd like to thank all of the candidates for joining us this evening. Most of all, I'd like to thank the viewing audience for my version of Groundhog Day. I think listening to the responses to the same two questions helps to delineate the differences that each candidate has and helps you, as a voter, make the ultimate decision and a responsible vote. So once again, I'd like to thank you all for coming. You have all seen a glimpse of the legislative agenda that our council has been working on and that we'll be voting on very soon. So I invite the public to come to the council and join us at a meeting one evening and see what we're doing with our legislative agenda. But most important, I'd like to ask the viewing audience to vote. In this country, we've been granted with one of the greatest gifts given to mankind, and that's a representative republic. Many people have died for this right. And to me, it's a travesty if we don't take our responsibility seriously and vote. So please, June 3rd, make it to the primary, make it to the polls, and vote. Thank you.